What would you do if your ex drained your savings, dragged you through years of court battles, and tried to take everything, including your kids? Today's guest, Lisa Johnson, faced exactly that and won. She turned her nightmare into a legal victory that changed state law and now helps others fight back against the legal abuse and high conflict exes. If you're trapped in a toxic custody battle or divorce, you cannot miss this episode. Have you ever felt like something was off, but you couldn't explain it? Like the person you love is slowly chipping away at who you are?
Or maybe you're starting to question everything, your feelings, your memory, your worth.
We've both lived that story.
Different marriages, same man, same toxic pattern.
Deception, spiritual manipulation, sexual addiction, financial abuse, it nearly broke us.
But even in our darkest moments, God was still working, holding space for the healing that we couldn't yet see.
I'm Lizzie.
And I'm Deana. We are the voices behind Surviving Toxic Relationships, a podcast and YouTube space created for women walking through the fire or rising from the ashes.
We're not therapists. We're survivors, mothers, grandmothers, and women of faith who refuse to stay silent.
So whether you're stuck, freshly out, or years into your healing, we are here with real stories, honest tools, and no sugarcoating.
You don't have to heal alone.
And you're not crazy. It was just that he was that convincing.
There is hope. There is healing.
And no matter what you've been through, you are deeply seen and deeply loved.
Welcome to Surviving Toxic Relationships. I'm Lizzie, and with me is Deana, but we also have a special guest, Lisa Johnson. She is the co-founder of Been There, Got Out, a high-conflict divorce strategist and certified domestic violence advocate who helps men and women all over the world navigate the legal system with an abusive ex. After a full year and $100,000 divorce, she had no choice but to represent herself in court after scores of court appearances in 2 states over the next several years. Justice was served beautifully. Her case was published in the Connecticut Law Journal and is being used as a legal precedent, which is unheard of for a self-represented litigant. Her live testimony also helped pass Jennifer's Law in Connecticut, the 3rd state in America, to expand its legal definition of domestic violence to include coercive control. Lisa and her male partner, Chris, coach people in high conflict relationships, divorce, custody battles, and co-parenting hell so they have the chance of the best outcome in the family court and beyond. They also offer a weekly legal abuse support group for men and women dealing with narcissistic opponents in legal matters. Their first book, Been There, Got Out, Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances, was released in March 2023. Book on what to do when your ex tries to turn the kids against you, as well as a comprehensive online program From Fear to Fierce in Family Court, is coming out later this year. What a biography, Lisa. We are so excited to have you here today, and we know that you have some wonderful insight that our listeners are going to embrace what you have to share with us today.
Thrilled to be here.
What an amazing thing you do. So I know, Lizzie, great job on the bio. That's a lot of bio.
I was like, this is impressive. I couldn't stop.
Like, what? But no, it's so amazing. And honestly, like, just the fact when you and I met that you were telling me that you literally came to the end of your financial rope, right? And so you had to represent yourself in court against your ex who was using, we call it legal abuse, to just basically hang you. And so take it from here. Tell your story. Tell us, how you got into this, and we'll just make this organic and go from there.
Yeah. So like you said, the divorce took a year and was 10 times what my worst nightmare. I thought it would be $10,000 that I couldn't afford, and it was 100,000, and I'm paying back those loans forever. And so the person that really told me I cannot afford him anymore was my divorce attorney. He just said, your ex is not going to comply. You can't afford me. He will continue to financially decimate you. So we need to start getting you ready to do it yourself. And so he basically gave me some ideas about laying the groundwork. I took a year and a few months off gathering my stuff together. And then I went back after a quick conversation with just a volunteer attorney at the court. I was going back to figure out college for my two kids because my ex refused, even though, of course, he promised to help and his father promised to help. It was like, nope, if you divorce me, I'm not helping pay for our kids' college. So I was going back for that. And this attorney said, let me see a little bit of what you got in the divorce and how it went. And she just said, this is a fraud case, but it's too hard to prove that. So when you go back for education, go back for modifications. And I was like, all right. And so I did. And it took, oh my gosh, about a year and multiple court appearances in Connecticut. And then I got these wonderful orders from the judge, and then nobody enforced them. So he was supposed to pay all this money. Our son had already started college at that point at a private college. He didn't do it. And I kept going back and saying, Your Honor, like I need him to pay his share. Our son's going to have to drop out of school. And they did the logical thing, which of course was exactly what my ex wanted. They said, sir, if you don't pay your portion, your son's going to have to drop out of school. And he was like, great, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to pay. So our son left school and luckily was able to get into a state school and was actually happier there. But this is the thing that people think is like, who would do that to their own child? People like my ex and people like all of our clients' ex, because they don't care about doing what's best for the kids or doing what's fair. They care about themselves and they care about doing everything they can to punish you. And so years went by where, he's obviously rich, has all kinds of real estate, had all kinds of attorneys. I tried to move part of the case from Connecticut to New York. He hired a criminal defense attorney. That went on. COVID happened. It was just like, I can't believe that me, a highly educated woman with a background in education who knows how to be persuasive, who knows how to communicate, still took this long. And they kept piling contempt motion onto contempt motion, putting penalties in, but nothing made him actually pay and do what he was supposed to, until finally everything started raining down pretty quickly and hard. The irony is that so we talked about Jennifer's Law. So there was a judge that was involved with a case with a woman named Jennifer Dulos. And of course it went sideways and everyone believes that Jennifer Dulos was murdered. That same judge, and by the way, I was in the paper for doing my testimony and advocating. That same judge was on my case. And I was like, oh my God, she's gonna rule against me because I was so involved with that kind of advocacy. It was completely the opposite. I got the best orders ever from that judge. Used Jennifer's Law in my own case to describe what I needed and why I was entitled to it. And she gave me above and beyond what I asked for. So that's why I always say justice and karma were served beautifully, and with that judge and also in New York, finally. Then my ex tried to sue us for $4 million in defamation. Like the day that it was, the deadline, just to distract. Then Chris and I took care of that ourselves. But it was just like, enough already. Just let us go on with our lives. But finally, yeah, done. I think pretty much done with court. The kids are out of college. Those orders, I call them orders with teeth, were paid to the penny on time. I didn't have to chase him. And I was just like, I can relax and focus everything on teaching other people what mistakes not to make and what to do to get what you need to get and get out of there.
So how long have you been teaching people how to represent themselves against someone who's a narcissist or a personality disorder?
So officially, probably about 4 years, but this really goes back to my career, which was as a high school English teacher, and I also was a creative writing teacher. And one of my favorite things to teach was persuasive writing. And in persuasive writing and communication, there's something called a concession, which means you anticipate what the other side's argument is and you incorporate it into what you're going to say. And so I was trained for this without realizing that I was. So now all those appearances in court and years later with our clients, I could say it's not about, certainly case laws involved sometimes in the timeline of your case, but your goal is to be likable and as credible as possible. Because when people like you, they believe you. So part of that is being persuasive and knowing how to behave yourself in the courtroom. It's called courtroom etiquette or courtroom decorum. I think a lot of women make mistakes because of stuff on social media where they're like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to educate the judge and I'm going to tell everybody what it's. You will do so poorly if you come in with guns blazing. My partner Chris made up this quote that said, if you come into court as Mama Bear, you're going to get bitten by the system. And that's the mistake that we see happen more than anything, is that people get in their heads that no one's going to believe me, everything is corrupt and biased, and I'm going to go in and show them, and they don't do well because court's not the place for that.
Which it makes sense. It takes some very specialized training so that people understand the environment of what they're walking into,
Right.
and how to behave that way. Yeah, that's
I
amazing.
mean, they don't court's not the place for validation. Like, they don't want to hear your story. We often say it's like you're paying $8 million, and we checked the price yesterday. You're $8 million for a 30-second Super Bowl commercial. So in that 30 seconds, and it's not much longer than that, you need to let the judge know, and especially if you're pro se, Your Honor, I'm here for this. This is what I'm entitled to, and here's why. So very simple. And I learned because I wrote these beautiful speeches, and I'd start reading them, and the judge would say, Miss Johnson, can we get to the point? And I was like, what page? What page is my point? What is my point? So really, learning to front load, we call it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense because I mean, I would think I would go in there too with the same thing. Like, I have an entire story that you need to understand. And once you understand my entire story, then you'll know like why I'm right and they're wrong. So it makes sense that you would want to do that in your passion to make people understand that you are the victim here. And this person is now making you another victim by dragging you into court and trying to take away the things that mean the most to you, like your children and any financial security you would ever have, on top of what they already did during the relationship.
But yeah, times 10, because you're out of there, hopefully. But I think also people don't understand that the court is very limited in what it can do. I mean, they operate in family court in terms of time and money. They cannot punish your ex. They cannot make them a better parent or a better person. They often give lots of slaps on the wrists. I learned that, where I was like, I got him now, and don't do that again. You need to do this over and over and over. You need to produce your discovery 9 times in a row. But they do that because nobody wants an appeal. And so, because that affects the judge's legacy. So what they'll do is it feels like they're not listening to a victim, but they're covering their tracks so that when that person appeals, like my ex appealed 4 times, he was destined to lose, hopefully, on the law. And I hope I made a really persuasive argument. I think I did, and that's why it was published. But they want to make sure that they're not making any mistakes, and so they give people the opportunity to be heard. If they shut someone down, then it could be perceived as like that person didn't have a chance to make their argument. We actually had a client years ago whose ex was very mentally ill and showed up to a hearing wearing dark sunglasses, gloves, carrying a brown paper bag with a little statue of the MGM lion and a Bible. And he took this out and he started ranting 40 minutes straight. Our client was beside herself and was saying like, I can't believe this is being allowed. Like, she thought they're actually believing this person. And after the time, the judge sat quietly nodding and said, Mr. So-and-so, you understand that everything you said is now on the record. And then they quickly took away all his parental rights for the next 6 months.
Wow, that is really so interesting.
Yeah.
That's a justice served right there for the victim. Yeah.
Of course, later, they had to figure it out because he got his punishment. He did what he was supposed to do. But by that time, our client and her kids were in a much better place.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So it's wonderful that you coach people while they're going through the process as well, so they can vent to you after a session. Obviously, you're not in the courtroom, but they can come back to you and say, oh my gosh, this happened and I probably lost, right? And you kind of were describing some of those emotions. So tell a little bit about that, how you just keep them afloat mentally and emotionally during probably one of the hardest things they've ever done, facing their abuser in a courtroom.
Yeah. So we call that debriefing. So we say, you want to meet with us before you have your court appearance to get organized and do some role playing. And I'm very good at playing the bully opposing counsel because we know they're going to be attacked. And they're always like, I hope they don't. And we're like, they're going to do it. So let's plan for it. So afterward, I found myself that I had a lot of insomnia during all those years, but I never slept the day of court, after court, and the couple days after, because my brain was processing everything that happened and trying to remember and thinking I should have done it differently. So being able to tell them before they even go to court, you are not going to be sleeping tonight, you're not going to sleep, and the next couple nights you're not, but that's totally normal. So we're going to talk about it. And a lot of times, it was the same with me, even when our clients have victories, they feel like it's not a win because all this other stuff happened. Like a judge will sometimes make positive comments about their ex and they'll remember that, or a negative comment about them. And so the actual orders, which often are totally in their favor, they'll be like, but the judge said this, and but I'm like, but look what the judge gave you. We had one client who I thought had some serious mental issues because she kept spiraling around how a judge was never listening, and her kid had medical issues, and her ex didn't do what the medical plan had required, and her daughter ended up in the hospital with a feeding tube for days. So at some point I was like, you know what, can we take a look at your order? And of course we do this all virtually. So she starts reading it to us, and I said, wait a second, do you realize that since your last hearing, you've had full decision making on your kid's medical treatment, and it also says in there that your ex has to report what he's doing to follow the plan in OFW, our family wizard, so that the court can also keep an eye on it. I was like, she goes, I didn't know that. I said, all this time where you feel like you haven't been heard, you already had everything in your favor. And if we go through it, the judge kept recognizing how what you're saying was true. But because she was so traumatized, she couldn't even look at those orders. So she didn't even realize what she had.
Yeah. And that is, that's so valuable. That is so valuable to have someone that says, wait a minute, let's reframe this. Let's take a look at what really happened. Plus I'm sure you can kind of read legalese better than most people, which is very confusing.
I don't speak legalese, but I can kind of read it.
I mean, probably better than us.
I speak a little legalese.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a wonderful thing to have.
So I have a question. Think of, men, because it's not uncommon for men to also be married to a narcissist. And if they're going through the process, when I went through my first divorce with 4 young children, the court system has a tender spot for the moms. Just at least that's been the past. Thank goodness it's been a long time ago. How often do we see the men who may have been the parent that has been the carry-all lose or win in these situations? I know it sounds crazy, but I think...
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound crazy.
Yeah.
So we work with male and female clients. I think the way it's portrayed in the news and social media, like women are the victims and men are the abusers. In certain like physical abuse, obviously women are more victims. Emotional abuse, it's pretty half and half. Legal abuse, lawyers have told me that women actually take advantage in the courtroom more than men. I don't know if that's true because we see both, but I can say that some of our most heartbreaking cases have been men, and men don't talk because there's all kinds of shame associated with domestic violence, and if you're a man, and expectations. And women, you always hear they say, I'm not being believed. It's worse for men because everyone assumes that a man, like you look at the size and everything, like how could you not keep your woman in line? Now, what you talked about, Lizzie, with the there's actually, you said the word tender. There's actually something called the tender years doctrine. That was like way back in the 70s. And that, I think that assumed that because women were the caregivers, that they would get more custody and they were the ones who were better equipped to raise the children. But it's actually feminism that changed things, because as women started going to work and earning money, that society started expecting men to take on more of the caretaker roles too. So things got a little bit more evenly divided. And so it's interesting how a lot of women now will be like, well, why don't I get custody because I'm the woman? I'm like, that's actually anti-feminist. But it's because we've become independent and society wants men to take on more roles and, more of that caretaking role. And so we see a lot of men, and we have a lot of men who have been the primary caretakers, even if both of them are working. We just got a new client the other day. He's like, I'm the one who took our kids to and from school. I'm the one that took them to the doctor. I read them to bed every single night. And that, my partner, Chris, that was his case too. He read his kids to bed every single night. And the thought of not having that anymore horrified him. That was like his worst nightmare, that his ex was going to destroy his relationship with his sons, especially when it first began and she was filing all kinds of these false accusations, which we see all the time in high conflict cases. It's just baked into legal abuse, is to start off with false allegations. But we see men do well. Some lawyers say in different parts of the country that they do favor dads. I know some states are now just like it's 50-50. And this is what it is, unless there's some proof of abuse or something, but we're just going to do 50-50. But there are custody factors that count. And it's still, I feel, on the client to make a very strong case as to what they want and why. But a lot of times, one of those factors is the primary. We call it the schlepping factor. I don't know if you know that term. It's a Yiddish term. And since we're New Yorkers, we use a lot of Yiddish. So schlepping kind of means taking, but like dragging. So you say, I'm schlepping I got to schlep my kids to school. I got to schlep them for their haircuts. It's like a way of like, So it's not the fun stuff. So we say, like, who's the one that does most of the schlepping, like does the homework and all that stuff? It's the parent that does the schlepping. That's not what they use in court, but the primary parent factor, that makes a big difference. So if someone's able to show, look, this is the history of what we've been doing, not just the few months before we filed for divorce, where someone's trying to be parent of the year, but this is how it's been. That's part of another factor, which is stability, consistency, and routine. If that's been the child's routine, they don't care about the parent's routine. They care about that child. That parent's been doing that. We don't want to disrupt the kids' lives more than necessary. So why wouldn't we try to stay consistent and allow that parent to do it? Now, a lot of people say, I want 50-50 because I don't want to pay child support. And we have male and female clients who pay child support. So nobody wants to pay child support. But they're going to look at other things in terms of, we're not just going to give you 50-50 and have you hire a nanny rather than letting the kids stay with the other parent because you just don't feel like paying child support.
Right. It's a gut-wrenching situation. I think of someone who's really close to me, and just the bad roll of dice. One was serving someone their divorce papers, and years went by, they never did anything, and then she moved out of state, and the child went there for just a month of time while the dad was trying to get himself together. And then in that process, she served him in another state. Mm-hmm. And so now there's legal because this person had to get a lawyer in that other state,
right,
to try to bring it back to the jurisdiction here, and then get the lawyer here where he's living to get his son back, because he was been the major caretaker for probably 4 years of that child's life. So you're looking at the major core of it, and no idea of who's actually schlepping him around right now, whereas in before it was the father who was doing all of that. Yeah. And he had worked a lifestyle that he made sure that the child was taken to school by him, picked up to school. And if he wasn't, then it was usually a grandparent, not just somebody. And now it's like nobody knows anything. So it's just gut wrenching. I always said there's nothing more horrific than family law anyway in this whole system. And number one, it is what's best for the child. But when it comes down to it, the fight is on. It doesn't matter who they are.
It is, and unfortunately, people in those situations have to spend so much money and fight really hard just to be a parent when they were a parent already. And so the topic of our current book, When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You, is about how to deal with it legally and outside of court so that you can do as well as you can. But it's a very lonely, unfair path, because the people who do that kind of thing, it's actually, if you can believe this, 22 million people in America and Canada alone are dealing with different levels of a parent trying to cut a child out of the other parent's life because of a separation or divorce. And 1 in 3 divorced parents say they have been affected in some way by it. So it's a huge issue, but there's so much shame associated with it, and it is really isolating. And I often compare it to I got this idea from a psychologist named Dr. Josh Coleman, who wrote a book called Rules of Estrangement. But he says that if a child dies, God forbid, but if a child dies, everybody rallies around you as a parent to support you. If you have a child that's not talking to you or has been taken away, people are judging you and thinking you must have done something wrong, because why would a child go with that other parent? How could this be happening? People don't understand there's so much complexity to issues like that, and that's why it's so important to find a community of people that really understand it, because Your lawyer probably doesn't. And you're dealing with all kinds of evaluators. A lot of them are not trained in these dynamics. And so it can feel so unfair. And the effects of this can affect that person's health, but also they walk around with this constant sense of rage at the injustice of it all. And that can make a poor impression on an evaluator, but also on your ex, because it's like they baited you into being so angry, and then the way you communicate with them can end up harming you, and also even with your own child because of all that frustration. So
Yeah.
people really need support and to understand that this is happening to a lot more people than they think. I think it does happen to more men than women, but we certainly have a lot of heartbroken women whose kids have been turned against them, and women and men who meet us for the first time, and we tell them what our book is about, and they're like, you can just see, they're like, that's my situation, it's happening, I can see it. So
And
yeah,
that's a
there's a lot
perfect
to say.
segue into the question that I wanted to ask, which is, how do you protect yourself when your ex is trying to turn your children against you?
Yeah, so this morning,
What can you do?
yeah, there's a lot you can do, but it's not like a quick thing to do. So first of all, it starts with establishing secure bonds with your child from the beginning that can never be taken away. Like 0 to 7, those formative years, spending quality time with your child where you're giving them your attention, you're letting them lead with activities. So as they get older, then, and this is what I wanted to just say, there's an alienation coach named Charlie McCready from the UK. He coined a term he calls pre-alienation. And that means that even when you're in the relationship with an abusive ex, they will start grooming your child into thinking that you are less than. They'll make fun of you. They'll make jokes about you. I know when I used to try to discipline my son when he was really little, my ex would interfere and be like, oh, mom's just cranky. You don't need to listen to her. So he undermined my authority. And so this stuff starts happening before there's a split, because that parent wants the loyalty of the child. So it's all being set up. But at the same time, if you are establishing your own close relationship with the child, that child is way less likely to be turned against you because they have their own memories. And also a big thing is teaching your child from an early age to develop critical thinking skills, which everybody should be learning, especially in this day and age, where there's so much information and now AI, like you don't even know what's real. And I think back to, again, when I taught high school, critical thinking, like consider the source, consider where this is coming from, what they want, why they want it, like not just to take everything at face value. So when you have children who are learning to question authority, even though it can be a pain to parent them because they're always pushy. I had one like that. He became like a national debate champion, and he's still annoying, but he's really smart. And I love him, but that's healthy. That's healthy for kids to rebel. It's the kids that want to people please. And a lot of our kids learn to do that because they see which parent needs more from them. That's a whole other topic. But I would say, establishing that quality time with the kids, recognizing what's happening, and then that's, there's a lot more you can do, but time with the kids, good time with the kids.
So make sure you have that relationship from the beginning and just nurture it all the way up. And that's your best defense.
When they come to you and say, oh, that other parent is saying that you're a liar, or you're this, that's triggering. So learning to be like, I wonder why they'd say that. Well, what do you think? I mean, you know me. Tell me when I've lied to you. Not to say, I'm not a liar, you know that. Because if they're saying one thing to your kid and you're saying that's not true, you're basically doing the same thing your ex is. You're telling that kid what to think and what to believe, and you're not showing them that you respect their autonomy and their ability to judge for themselves. I mean, obviously it's different with teenagers versus really little kids, but what you want to do is encourage them to learn to explain to you why they believe that. So, well, this person said that. Okay, I'm not going to freak out, even though I'm freaking out inside. Like, tell me more about how you feel hearing something like that. Do you think it's true? Do you think it's not true? What evidence do you have? And then they usually are like, no. And then they go do something else with their childhood, which is what they should be doing.
That is so applicable. It's so true, because even as a school teacher, we try to say, well, what do you think? Because that was the one lost art we have in education, is the critical thinking skills. But a lot of times it does start in the home. And what a great thing to do for your child, to give them that ability to have that by asking just those questions and not defending yourself. And I think that's what a lot of people do, especially the victims. We
Of
tend to
course.
defend ourselves, right? It's natural, but then you get to the point you're going, it's not doing any good. Sometimes things just have to play out organically so you don't lose that emotional energy. But for the child to be able to come up with their own thought process, I think that is just so spot on and such a great skill set.
Yeah, and also you have to remember that to your child, both parents are authority figures. They think neither of my parents is going to lie to me. So if one parent is saying one thing and the other saying the opposite, they start experiencing cognitive dissonance because they're like, I don't know who is right. And so they're telling me this, that's not my experience. The other one's telling me that's not really my experience, but I don't know what to think. And then they feel pushed to pick sides. And often they pick the side of the abuser because that person is needier. Their love is conditional. The kid realizes that. And a lot of adult children who have been alienated from a parent, when they get older, they have been known to come back to the targeted parent, we say, and say, I knew that you would be okay without me, but the other parent wouldn't. And I'm so sorry I did that. And I wish you had kept trying to stay in touch with me instead of listening to me saying, I hate you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, that makes so much sense. It really does. Thank you. That was an excellent explanation. So the last question I have, and I'm going to combine two, and it might be a long answer, but I'm just going to combine. So explain a few red flags that your divorce might be high conflict. And once you realize that that's where it's going, what are some things you could do, a few practical steps to protect yourself, that situation?
Okay. Yeah, that is a huge compound question. All right. So in our current book, this is the one we mentioned earlier, the first one, there's a whole chapter on indications of high conflict divorce. And this really came from when I met with my amazing divorce attorney, who was my best friend and I spent $100,000 on. Our first meeting, within 20 minutes, he said, yours is going to be one of the bad ones. And I was like, how did you know? Because I thought my ex was a good person who had just done some bad things. So later, with Been There, Got Out, I interviewed my lawyer and I said, tell me. And he said, okay. He didn't have like a list, but he said, these are the things that I noticed. So one of the things is when that person has some kind of addiction or mental disorder. Somebody who has a personality disorder or mental illness is not in their right mind and their judgment is not clear. They have poor judgment. They can't make the best decisions even for themselves, and they don't think about the consequences of their actions. So you're dealing with someone that's completely illogical, and it's very hard to move forward through the divorce process with somebody who's out of their mind, basically, on top of wanting to punish you. So that's a couple of red flags, addiction, mental. So I'm not talking about someone in recovery. That's completely different. But somebody who is actively addicted to something that cannot control themselves. Very big problem. That's where you start spending loads of money trying to, work with them and negotiate with someone who keeps changing their mind. And so on that same note, domestic violence victims are also signals of high conflict divorce. So knowing that when Chris and I first meet with someone, if they are not completely ready to get out of that relationship, we say, let's not work together yet because we don't want to waste your time and money, because it takes an average of 7 to 9 times to actually get out. And so hope is the thing that kills people, is they think, well, but my ex said they're going to try, and we're getting back to, well, maybe. And they're telling me this. And so that also drags out the process and can cost a lot of money as well as time. And lawyers get really frustrated with that too. Another thing is stuff with money where they hide assets. I always like the quote, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. Someone with that attitude who's like, I don't need to show you stuff. Like, I'm the one who worked, even though maybe you raised the kids for their whole lives, but it's my money. And so they will not comply with discovery. Like I said, they'll do all kinds of wacky things to make sure that you don't see it. And then they'll just tell you don't deserve it. This is mine. But that's not the case. And that's why it is so important to learn your rights from your own lawyer. Don't believe them that you should have the same lawyer. Not high conflict. Amicable, great. This, no. And then lastly, the thing that stands out more than anything, which it might take some time to realize, is anger that does not subside. These are the people who time passes and they are still as furious as ever. They get new partners, they still harass you as if you are the main thing that they need to destroy. It doesn't matter. People go, but he has a new girlfriend or she has a new husband. Why does she still care? Why does he still care? Because they They have to destroy you because you carrying on with your life without them is a symbol of their failure. And they don't want any reminder of that. And the same thing with your children. If your child shows affection towards you, you give your child a gift, they'll throw it out because they don't want any reminders of you. And that child's not allowed to love both of you because then there's that loyalty issue. You're with me or you're against me. And so those are the general red flags of high conflict divorce. Now, what can you do about it? All right. So the big thing is something that Chris and I teach. We call it an umbrella term. It's called taking strategic oversight of your case. So realizing as early as possible that this case is going to be very, very different than normal divorce. This is the 10% of the cases where we say our club is, my lawyer says this is the craziest case they've ever had. So we're all in that club, and lawyers get fatigued. They can't keep up with the details. And also with choosing a lawyer, we like to remind people that you came out of this relationship where that other person became the authority for whatever reason in your life, and now you're out. Don't repeat the cycle and hire an attorney and be like, now I have this attorney, I just dropped $25,000 and they're going to take care of everything and they're going to save my life. So I don't need to pay attention because my lawyer's doing it. No, you need to step up, and this is a great opportunity because it's changing the dynamic of you as a human being, and to say, I know my life better than anyone. I know my ex better than anyone. My lawyer has other cases. I am going to have to be responsible for staying on top of things. I need to know what motions are being filed, what I'm signing. I need to proofread everything. And if I don't understand, I need to say to my lawyer without being terrified that they're going to get mad at me, please help me understand this. I need to not have lawyers submit proposals that I haven't even looked at because I need to learn to speak for myself and to say, don't send anything without my checking it. If your ex is running up your bills, which is what happens all the time by making their lawyer send loads of frivolous correspondence to your lawyer, you need to say, attorney, I cannot keep up with all of this. Can you please forward me everything if that's okay? Unless you feel it's necessary and important. But like, I don't want to pay you to read my ex's nonsense because that's going to run up my bills. Big thing, negotiation. There's so much you can do without having your lawyer do it for you that we call strategic communication. That's that course, how to communicate with your ex without destroying your case or losing your mind. So you're communicating, but you can also negotiate without going to mediation yet. Might land there, but there's so much you can do with that knowledge because knowledge is leverage, and you want to know how to approach your ex. You don't want to come in with blame and accusations. You want to do everything you can to lessen the conflict, to disarm them, because the more conflict there is, the more money it costs, time, and also it bleeds onto your children. So your children suffer. So even if you're dealing with someone who's super high conflict, you were in that relationship and you know how to fawn. You know what it takes to keep the peace and survive. And now you're out. So hopefully some of that stuff you used to do is not, you don't need to do that anymore, but you know how their mind works. And so that is really important intel. And we always ask our client, well, they'll be like, I don't even know how to handle that person. We'll get to like, well, let's talk about what they've been asking you for. How can we use that? How can we use the fact that they want to appear as the perfect parent? What can we do? One of our clients earlier is like, my ex, they're from another country and there's like all these names and hyphenated surnames and stuff, and she has one and the ex-husband has another, and they were actually never married. And so one of the things that really matters to that ex-partner is to have the child's name be part of his name too. So I say to our client, like, that's something that you can use. You want some things. He's always gone on about this. So let's hold on to it. And when you're ready to negotiate, let's bring up the fact that maybe you're willing to do a hyphenated last name. So there's things people don't realize that they have. They just think, oh, I can't do it. You can, but it takes some thought and analysis and planning. And then it's a chess game. It's not a quick, like, oh, I go to mediation for 2 hours, then I failed. No, it's a process. And keep in mind too, that your ex wants to keep you engaged. They want your attention. Your negative attention is more pleasurable than positive attention. So understanding all of that too is important, and how to work with it.
Excellent. That's excellent. Thank you so much. You did a great job combining those two questions. And that's exactly, I think that's enough for people to just understand that they need your book. They really need your book. Both of them, all of them. They need all of them.
Well said, Deana. I like that. Yeah. I'd agree with that.
So anything else, Lizzie? Do you have anything else?
No, I think that was a lot to absorb. What a great information, things that are applicable for people that are in the fire. I loved it.
Yeah.
Good.
Lisa,
Yeah, I
do you
hope
have
it's
anything?
helpful.
Oh, sorry. Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yes. Yes. Of
Tell
course
tell
I
us
do.
where we can find you. Yes, add whatever you want, and also tell us where we can find those books and any information that people might want to work
Okay.
with you. Okay.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to add, and I will try to keep this short, is if you are dealing with legal abuse or a really difficult ex, you should not be doing something we call doom scrolling. Do not fill your head right now with social media and articles about kids being murdered and terrible court decisions and the injustice and books on how unfair it is and people get their lives ruined because of losing custody. That is rare. 99% of cases, including high conflict, get settled outside of court. That's what we try to have our clients do because you have a lot more power. It's almost like what bleeds is what leads in news. So do not think that looking at this stuff, that's going to happen to you, because it's also going to harm you and your health and your case and your kids. Because it's going to make you develop that sense of helplessness. It's biased, it's corrupt. My ex is rich and he's a man and I'm never, that it's just not true. So please stay away from doom scrolling now. Maybe later, sociological report, you can look at that stuff, but now is not the time. You're already traumatized. That's making it worse. That's changing the patterns of your brain where there's certain pathways. It's making them deeper. So do not harm yourself and everything around you by looking at that and panicking. So that's my last little tidbit. Now, in terms of finding us, super, super easy. So we're Been There, Got Out. Just Google Been There, Got Out. You'll find us everywhere. Our website's beentheregotout.com. Instagram's my home base for social media, but we're everywhere. And we're just Been There, Got Out. And we have a podcast and a YouTube channel, the book that came out, the new book that's coming out, the From Fear to Fierce in Family Court. Our weekly legal abuse support group is also an option on our homepage. We do a free discovery call, which is a Zoom meeting. We always like to see people's faces. We do nothing with phones, just faces. But we're very accessible. It's just Chris and me, and we always answer.
Love it. And we'll make sure and have the links, whether you're listening on our audio or on the YouTube channel, so that way you can easily find her as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting me and letting me talk about this important topic.
Absolutely. We just appreciate your time and your knowledge that you were able to share with our listeners.
Again, my pleasure.
We appreciate Lisa for sharing her powerful story and wisdom. She has given us so much hope and practical advice to people walking through these hard, high conflict situations. And for anyone listening, if you're in the thick of a toxic divorce or custody battle, please know you are not alone. Support is out there. We'll have Lisa's information below, and we highly recommend checking out her books, programs, and weekly support groups. You don't have to navigate this all by yourself. And if this episode encouraged or helped you, please follow our podcast, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs it. Your reviews help us reach more people who are in the trenches. We'll be back soon with more real, raw conversations to help you heal and reclaim your life. Until then, stay strong, know that you are not alone, and you are deeply, deeply loved. Thank you.